Okay, so back to, we've got another program called FileSum2, and the way it works is it works just like the other FileSum. It's going to read a file called numbers.txt, except this time what we're going to do is we are going to use if file exists, and then we remember how we have the exclamation point there, that's a not statement. So if not file exists, so we created a file class, we used a file class to create a file, and we're instantiating it as a brand new file class, and we're calling it numbers.txt. If that file does not exist, we will go ahead and display the file number txt is not found, and then system.exit0. Don't know if we've covered this. This basically just ends the entire program, just nixes it, we're done, and it gets out. So none of this other code after that will get executed. It just basically stops right there. If that statement is false, we go ahead and continue on. Now again, I think I talked about this. I would much rather use stay away from the not statement. I would say if file exists, continue on, and have an else at the end to basically nix it. So, but however you do it, it's going to work either way. And then the rest of this is we've already seen before. So. Okay. If you really want to get a good feel for the whole process put together, you can go ahead and take a look at the file sum. No, I'm sorry. It's the file write demo 2. Take a look at that. That basically puts everything all together in one big file. Now continue on over to page 253. Talks about random numbers. Now random numbers are a big thing in Java, most all programming languages, because sometimes we just need a number, and this really comes into play a lot in your gaming type programming situations where you need a random number. One of the examples we're going to basically look at is the roll dice. But random numbers, so let's take a look at the Math Tutor program on page 254. And the first thing you'll notice is up here we've imported a java.util.random. So we're actually bringing in a random API. So we come down here and we're creating 4 different integer variables: number 1, number 2, sum, and user answer. We're using the keyboard, the scanner keyboard, so we're going to use the console to input and get data and display data. And then I basically say random. So we have a random class, and I create a random number object from that class, and I'm instantiating it as a new random. Notice that there's nothing inside of the parentheses, so in this particular case nothing is needed in that particular instance. So we now have a random numbers class. What's in it? Well, at this point we don't know. Just think of it as a big glob of numbers. So it's just sitting with a big glob of numbers. Which numbers? At this point we don't know. We need to give it a range of numbers. So if we look over here, I say number 1 equals random numbers dot next int, and it's got 100. So basically what it's going to get is, now we've reduced that big glob of numbers down to a range of 1 through 100. So now we have a hat of 1 through 100, and somebody's reaching in that hat and pulling out a number, and basically that is our random number at that point. We're doing the same thing with random number 2. So when we get done with these 2 lines, we now have 2 random numbers that have been chosen between 1 and 100. So we print out what is the answer to the following problem. Number 1 concatenated with the plus sign, and number 2 equals. So basically what we're saying is this random number plus that random number equals what, and then I go ahead and say sum equals number 1 plus number 2, and the user answer basically will type in a keyboard entry, and notice it says next int, so it is expecting an integer data type that's being put into the user answer, and if the user answer is equal to the sum, we go ahead and say correct, else we'll say incorrect. So if we were to run this, math tutor run as, okay, so we come in and it grabs two random numbers, 39 and 84. So it now wants us to type in an answer. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and type in an incorrect answer. So I type in 45 and it comes up and says, sorry, the correct answer is 123. So if we run it again, this time we have 25 and 9, and I go ahead and type in 34 and hit the enter key. It says that is correct. Okay, so again, random number. The key is what you put in over here. Okay. If you look on page 254, page 254 talks about the different parameters we can use with the random number class. Let me see if I can bring up 254. And so if we look over here, here we have a next double, a next float, a next int, a next int. This method accepts an integer argument in and returns a random number as int, and we have a next long. Okay, so a few different ways to basically get random numbers depending on what type of variable, type of data type we have. Let's take a look at the roll dice. And the roll dice is just that. We have some dice that we want to roll and bring back a random number. So we basically have string, a variable string called again, and it's equal to yes. We've got two integers, die1, die2. Again, I'm basically got my keyboard system in, so we're going to basically use the console to get and receive data to display to the user. And here's my random class. I'm creating a rand object, and I'm instantiating it as a new random class. Again, nothing in the parentheses, so nothing's there. I'm saying while again dot equals ignore case y. So basically it doesn't matter if it's an uppercase y or lowercase y. If it's a y, we go ahead and continue on. So we display rolling the dice. Then I basically set my die 1 and die 2, and it's a rand dot next int 6, okay, plus 1. So let me I kind of told you wrong a few minutes ago, and that whenever we have this 6 in here, it's actually 0 through 5. You know, yeah. So, yeah, it's actually 0 through 5, right. Yeah. So what we're doing is, yeah. So when it grabs a random number and it says 6, that's 0 through 5. Well, a die is 1 through 6. So what we're saying is any number we get back, let's add 1 to it, and that will get us 1 through 6 at that particular instance. We do the same thing for the die 2. And then I go ahead and say the values are, and basically die 1 plus die 2, and there we have it. Do you want to roll again? So if we run this program, rolling the dice, the values are 5 and 5. Do you want to roll them again? I'll go ahead and say yes. 2 and 1, yes. 3 and 5, yes. 3 and 5, 1 and 4, 4 and 6, 2 and 1. So as you can see, we basically can continue rolling this dice. So again, pretty cool program to have if we were to have some type of a gaming program that we were writing. On page 259, it talks about the different errors to avoid. Let me get to that page. And it says using the increment or decrement operator in the wrong mode. It says when the increment or decrement operator is placed in front or to the left of the operand, it is used in prefix mode. So we're basically talking about the do while loop. Make sure we have it in the correct correct spot. So what we're saying there is if in my while statement, in my loop statement, if I'm expecting it to keep increasing, and then I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to get out of the loop because I'm increasing, I'm going to eventually get out of that loop. But let's say somehow in there I decrement when I should be incrementing, I could get into an endless loop type of a situation. Forgetting to close the Boolean expression in the while or do loop in the parentheses, placing a semicolon at the end of the while or for loops header, forgetting to write the semicolon at the end of a do while loop, forgetting to enclose multiple statements in the body of the loop and braces. So if we have multiple statements, if we have more than one, we have to make sure we have the beginning brace and the ending brace. Forgetting to write code in the body. And again, going back to that, if you have just one statement, still want to use the brace, by all means you can do that as well. I kind of fall into that realm whenever I code. I always like to use the brace, just for the fact that I'm kind of old school that way, and at some point I may want to add another line, and all I have to do is add another line with not worry about the brace. Using commas instead of semicolons to separate the initialization, test, and update expression for a for loop. Remember how we've got the for, we set the, we declare the variable and set it. We then basically have our what was it? The check, yeah, and then we basically have the incrementation. So making sure that we use commas instead of semicolons at that point. Forgetting to write the code in the body of a while or do while loop that modifies the loop. So again, what we're saying there is, if we have a while statement and we're expecting it to do things to keep looping, we got to make sure we do those things, or we're going to be in an endless loop. Using a sentinel value that can also be used to validate value. So we're basically, the sentinel value says, hey, we need some type of a parameter to close this loop, to stop the loop from executing anymore. And forgetting to initialize the accumulator to 0. Very important. If you're going to have an accumulator, got to start at 0 or some numeric value that is important to you. That's basically it. We will then continue on with chapter 5. We're going to hit the first couple sections of 5. Going to get into methods. So we'll see you in a little bit.